So my journey in this started back when I was a kid. I grew up in a small town, upstate New York. Both my parents were school teachers, dad 5th grade, mother 3rd grade, and special needs. And my dad was a great teacher also, but I really learned from my mother. Her name was Katie, and her main name's Blessing, so that's the foundation's named after Katie Blessing Foundation, Katie Blessing Center. And, but she was the type of teacher that a lot of her students were at the poverty level, or below the poverty level. And when they would come into the classroom, she would recognize that sometimes they were wearing the same clothes, not just for days at a time, but even weeks at a time. And she was the type of school teacher that on a teacher's income, she would take them to Kmart, get them new clothes, give them my brothers and my hand-me-downs. She would give them haircuts. She would make sure they were cleaned up. I was just really fortunate to see what just true love and compassion for others looked like, and that's really where my journey began. I will say over the last 23 years that I've been down here in Charlotte, I've opened up a lot of clinics in what are considered to be underserved areas, and the need for not just primary care services, but services of all kinds. And it wasn't until a little over a year ago I was actually at an event, and I ran into a doctor from Atrium that was working in the emergency departments that was telling me about the challenges that the hospital systems, not just here in Charlotte with Novant and Atrium, but across the state and really across the country were having with kids sometimes sitting in there for, not just days, but weeks waiting for psychiatric beds to open up somewhere here in North Carolina, realizing that there just weren't enough beds, wasn't enough staff. And that's when I realized a decade ago, I'd had a building that I had occupied that would be perfect for this. So set the wheels in motion. Eventually the city council voted unanimously to sell the building to our organization, and we began immediately. We started researching and realizing why North Carolina is ranked really at the bottom of all the states in the entire country when it comes to quality behavioral health care services. We have kids, hundreds of kids, that are actually receiving this care out of North Carolina in different states because we don't have those beds. And North Carolina is a very prosperous state, so this is a problem not a lot of people are aware of. And we're trying to shed as much light on it as possible, and that's really why I wanted to create this video. So at the end of the day, this facility, it's going to have 70 beds. It's going to be a combination of not just inpatient and residential services, but we're also going to have services where the kids can come in and a behavioral health urgent care, where the parents just don't have to take them to an emergency department, so to speak, and which is not the greatest place for a kid to be when they're going through this type of crisis. Take them into a place where they can actually be assessed and determine if they need care, residential or inpatient care or not. And not just that, the continuity of care after they're discharged from these, making sure that everything's under one roof. We owe it to our kids to be able to do this, especially post-pandemic. As our organization pivoted out of this pandemic, I really feel like we've just really stepped into the next public health emergency, which is behavioral health. And it's not just kids, of course, but right now they are the most vulnerable, and we need to pay attention to that. And one more thing, when it comes to taking on a project like this, there's a reason why behavioral health services are lacking in North Carolina. It's not really a service where there's a lot of reimbursements. Remuneration for this type of care is not high. So getting off the ground, getting a company like us to do this, it's kind of rare, we've learned as we've done this. There's a lot that's going on in this building. We're doing it in a very economic fashion, but when I tell you our organization, independently us, we're putting in $15 million. The state of North Carolina, the General Assembly found out what we were doing. They matched what we were doing with another $15 million, which is leaving us with about a $15 million gap. I believe by all of these moving parts coming together that we really can make a difference, not just here in Charlotte, not just here in North Carolina, but really set the example for what can possibly be done across the country. Thanks.